The birth of terror, November 1478, marked the beginning of an institution so brutal that even the Pope who authorized it would later try to shut it down. King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile had secured something unprecedented from Rome. Pope Sixtus IV had granted them personal authority to appoint inquisitors answerable to the Spanish crown alone. Never before had secular monarchs wielded such direct control over the persecution of religious offenses. What followed would span 356 years, claim thousands of lives through burning at the stake, subject tens of thousands more to systematic torture, and create a surveillance state so pervasive that neighbors turned against neighbors, children informed on parents, and an entire nation learned to live in perpetual fear. The roots of this terror lay in a question of blood and belief that had haunted the Iberian Peninsula for generations. Violent persecution throughout the 1400s had compelled massive numbers of Jews to accept Christian baptism or face death. The brutal pogroms of 1391 proved particularly devastating, forcing conversions across every major city. By the late 15th century, approximately 200,000 baptized Christians of Jewish descent lived throughout Spanish territories. These conversos had built prosperous lives over subsequent generations. They practiced medicine, conducted international trade, managed royal finances, and entered religious orders. Certain families had united through marriage with aristocratic bloodlines stretching back centuries. But success bred resentment, and resentment bred suspicion. Whispers circulated that baptismal water had changed nothing beneath the surface. Accusations held that conversos maintained their ancestral faith behind barred doors while performing Christianity for public audiences. The truth of these claims mattered far less than their power to destroy. During 1477, Queen Isabella encountered a Dominican friar named Alonso de Ojeda while residing in Seville. This zealous preacher convinced her that hidden enemies surrounded the throne, that thousands of baptized subjects secretly rejected Christ while enjoying privileges meant only for faithful Catholics. Isabella carried these fears to Ferdinand, and together they requested papal authorization for tribunals operating under direct royal supervision. Sixtus IV granted their petition, despite profound reservations about monarchs controlling religious persecution. Those reservations proved justified almost immediately. Complaints accumulated in Rome so rapidly that by 1482, the Pope formally condemned the Spanish tribunals for inflicting unjust imprisonment, torturing confessions from innocent people, executing those guilty of no actual heresy, and stealing the property of the condemned. The Spanish crown dismissed these objections entirely and expanded operations regardless of papal protests. Tribunals had commenced functioning in Seville during late 1480 under two Dominican friars, eager to demonstrate results. Their first public ceremony occurred on a February morning in 1481, when flames consumed 6 condemned prisoners before assembled crowds. 3.5 centuries of institutionalized terror had begun. The hammer of heretics, the man who would transform the Spanish Inquisition into a machine of unprecedented efficiency, entered the world in 1420 in the Castilian town of Valladolid. Tomás de Torquemada carried a troubling possibility in his family history that scholars have debated for centuries. Evidence suggests Jewish ancestry may have existed within his own lineage. meaning the greatest persecutor of conversos, potentially descended from the very population he would spend his life destroying. Whether factual or not, this unresolved question haunts his legacy. The Dominican order became his home while still young, and Torquemada developed practices of physical self-denial that contemporaries found remarkable even by monastic standards. He consumed no animal flesh across his entire lifetime, according to those who knew him. Coarse garments worn directly against skin served as constant reminder of human sinfulness. Hard surfaces replaced soft bedding because comfort represented weakness of spiritual character. This willingness to embrace personal suffering foreshadowed his capacity to inflict suffering upon others. 22 years of service at a Segovian monastery brought him into the orbit of Princess Isabella. She chose him as the priest who would receive her confessions and counsel her spiritual development. This intimate religious relationship continued after she became Queen of Castile in 1474, granting Torquemada influence over royal decisions that few advisors could match. Royal appointment as Grand Inquisitor arrived on October 2nd, 1483, delivering authority over every tribunal operating throughout Spanish domains. He wielded this power with administrative brilliance that made the Inquisition terrifyingly effective. 28 detailed instructions standardized operations across all territories under his command. Informant networks penetrated every parish and neighborhood. Bureaucratic systems for processing denunciations, conducting examinations, and recording proceedings created institutional memory that would function long after his death. What had begun as scattered local operations became a unified apparatus of religious persecution encompassing 24 separate offices by the conclusion of his 15 years directing the institution. Records indicate approximately 100,000 individuals appeared before tribunals during this period. Rome eventually concluded that Torquemada himself required restraint. Protests against his severity accumulated until Pope Alexander VI intervened in 1494, assigning for additional inquisitors whose actual purpose was limiting the Grand Inquisitor's excesses rather than merely assisting his administration. The Pope had determined that even an institution designed for persecution had boundaries, and Torquemada had crossed them. Death claimed him in September 1498 within monastery walls at Avila. His burial there would not prove permanent. 34 years before the Inquisition finally ceased operations, intruders violated his tomb, extracted his skeletal remains, and consigned them to flames, mirroring the fate he had delivered unto thousands. The persecutor received the punishment of the persecuted. The machinery of persecution, the Spanish Inquisition, sustained itself through a currency more valuable than gold or silver. Denunciations poured into inquisitorial offices from every corner of Spanish society without ceasing. Business competitors sought advantages through accusations of heresy against their rivals. Servants harbored deep resentments against employers who had wronged them. Siblings pursued inheritance disputes through religious channels rather than civil courts. Spurned lovers transformed romantic rejection into formal charges of religious deviation. The system protected those who provided names while mercilessly exposing those who were named. Accusers remained completely anonymous throughout all proceedings against the accused. The defendant never learned who had spoken against them or what motivated the testimony. This single feature transformed Spanish society into a web of mutual suspicion where trust itself became dangerous. Inquisitors maintained detailed catalogues of behaviors that supposedly revealed hidden Jewish practice among baptized Christians. These indicators ranged from dietary choices to household routines to personal hygiene habits observed over time. Abstaining from pork or shellfish drew immediate attention from watchful neighbors. Draining blood from meat before cooking suggested possible adherence to ancient dietary codes. Bathing or changing clothing in patterns that aligned with the Jewish calendar invited serious questions. Gathering with other converso families on particular evenings could initiate a formal investigation. The central difficulty was that most of these activities had multiple explanations entirely unrelated to secret religious practice. A family might avoid certain foods due to personal taste or persistent digestive troubles. Cleanliness on any particular day meant nothing beyond basic self-care and hygiene. Social gatherings among people who shared cultural backgrounds were natural human behavior everywhere. None of these reasonable explanations offered protection once the machinery began turning against you. Arrest followed accusation, often arriving without any prior warning to the accused. Officers of the Inquisition appeared at homes and workplaces to escort defendants into custody. Everything the accused person owned became subject to immediate confiscation under the justification of covering institutional expenses. This arrangement meant the Inquisition operated as a self-sustaining enterprise with direct financial interest in pursuing those who possessed assets worth seizing. Detention facilities ranged considerably in their severity and conditions for prisoners. Initial confinement might occur in spaces with basic amenities and occasional daylight filtering through. Continued resistance brought transfer to progressively harsher environments designed to break willpower. The deepest cells offered nothing but stone walls, absolute darkness, starvation rations, and strictly enforced silence. This graduated system served a purpose beyond simple punishment of the disobedient. It demonstrated precisely what awaited those who refused to provide cooperation. Formal proceedings eventually followed imprisonment that could stretch across months or even years. The accused received information about the nature of charges and possessed theoretical rights to mount a defense. Legal advocates risked their own safety by associating with accused heretics before the tribunal. The entire structure rested on an assumption that accusation itself indicated guilt, requiring confession. Inquisitors viewed their task not as weighing evidence to reach truth, but as securing acknowledgement of sins already presumed committed. When prisoners refused to provide the confessions that inquisitors sought through ordinary questioning alone, the process advanced two methods specifically designed to overcome such stubborn resistance. Inside the torture chamber, official regulations governing inquisitorial interrogations appeared remarkably humane when read from the safety of papal documents. No blood was to be spilled during questioning sessions, according to church mandate. Permanent bodily harm violated ecclesiastical principles that theoretically guided all proceedings. Medical professionals were supposed to assess prisoners and confirm their physical capacity to withstand intensive examination. The gap between written policy and actual practice proved as wide as the chambers were deep. 3 techniques received formal approval for use against prisoners who maintained their innocence despite prolonged ordinary questioning. Each technique accomplished its purpose. Through pain that left no visible bleeding, while frequently causing injuries that lasted lifetimes. Suspension formed the basis of the first approved technique that inquisitors employed regularly. Guards secured the arms of the accused behind the back at the wrists before connecting these bonds to ropes running through overhead mechanisms, hoisting the prisoner. Upward transferred all bodily weight onto shoulder joints, twisted into positions nature never intended them to occupy. The intensity increased through calculated drops that halted abruptly before reaching the floor below. Additional mass fastened to the lower extremities multiplied the destructive forces acting upon already strained connective tissues throughout the upper body. Controlled drowning comprised the second technique available to interrogators seeking confessions from resistant prisoners. Attendants positioned the accused on an angled surface that elevated the feet above the level of the head. Fabric pushed into the oral cavity extended toward the back of the throat to create obstruction. Liquid dispensed gradually onto this fabric created the inescapable sensation of suffocation through flooding airways. Victims experienced the absolute certainty of imminent death repeatedly while remaining conscious for further questioning between applications. Detailed records documented the exact volumes administered during each individual session. Mechanical stretching through the third technique produced results that interrogators considered highly reliable for obtaining cooperation. The apparatus consisted of a flat wooden platform equipped with rotating cylinders at each end, to which the extremities were fastened securely. Operating these cylinders increased the distance between anchor points incrementally with each rotation applied. The human frame resisted this unnatural elongation until anatomical limits were exceeded and structural failures began occurring audibly. Shoulders and hips separated from proper alignment as the spacing continued expanding under mechanical force. Officials responsible for documentation attended every session conducted within these chambers below ground level. Their quills recorded each question posed and each answer received with administrative thoroughness. The techniques applied and their duration received notation, alongside observations about prisoner responses throughout the process. Archives throughout Spain still contain these manuscripts, describing systematic destruction of human bodies in the dispassionate language of institutional record-keeping. Theological doctrine transformed these practices from atrocities into acts of profound spiritual charity. Confessions extracted through physical destruction were recorded as voluntary acknowledgments of guilt freely provided by the accused. The momentary suffering of mortal flesh served to rescue eternal souls from infinitely greater torments, awaiting the unrepentant. Those who administered these sessions performed their duties, believing themselves servants of divine mercy. Spectacle of death, the Spanish Inquisition conducted its most disturbing work, not in hidden dungeons, beneath stone fortresses, but in bright daylight before audiences, numbering in the tens of thousands. These public ceremonies carried a name that translated to act of faith. Yet what unfolded during these gatherings bore no resemblance to any faith rooted in mercy or compassion. The auto de fe represented the final stage of inquisitorial proceedings, the moment when months or years of secret imprisonment culminated in public spectacle designed to terrify entire populations into absolute conformity. Preparation consumed weeks of coordinated effort among religious authorities, civil officials, and skilled craftsmen. Workers erected massive wooden platforms and tiered seating throughout central plazas to to accommodate the thousands who would gather to witness their neighbors face judgment. The condemned spent their final night before the ceremony in temporary holding areas, while clergy maintained continuous prayers until sunrise. Morning brought processions that wound through city streets toward the central staging grounds. Inquisitorial officials marched in ceremonial robes alongside representatives of noble families and municipal government. Behind them walked the condemned, barefoot and stripped of all dignity. Each prisoner wore garments specifically designed to broadcast their crimes and fates to every observer. These sanbenitos communicated through color and imagery what words could not convey quickly enough to passing crowds. Fabric decorated with painted flames and demonic figures marked those who would not survive the day. Tall, pointed caps, called carrozas, added further humiliation while ensuring visibility above the dense masses pressing against processional routes. The ceremonies themselves stretched across entire days as officials read individual sentences, while the accused stood exposed before communities that had once counted them as members. Religious sermons reminded spectators of the terrible consequences awaiting anyone who deviated from accepted doctrine. One ceremony achieved particular infamy for demonstrating how far the Inquisition had embedded itself within Spanish society and governance. Madrid witnessed this extraordinary event on June 30th, 1680, when approximately 50,000 spectators filled every available space surrounding the Plaza Mayor. King Charles, to himself, presided from an elevated platform constructed specifically for royal viewing, transforming religious persecution into entertainment for the court. Proceedings continued for 14 uninterrupted hours as 118 individuals learned their fates before this massive audience. Those condemned to death were led from the plaza to execution grounds outside city walls. Victims who confessed received the supposed mercy of strangulation before flames consumed their bodies. Those who refused recantation faced the full horror of burning alive, flames climbing slowly from feet toward torso, while consciousness persisted through unimaginable agony. The purpose was never merely punishment, but public education through terror. The Inquisition had transformed murder into public celebration, and Spanish society gathered to watch. The Spanish Inquisition did not persecute randomly or without purpose. It targeted specific populations with systematic precision, destroying communities that had contributed to Spanish prosperity for centuries, while enriching the crown and church through confiscation of everything the condemned had built across generations. Conversos bore the heaviest burden of persecution from the institution's earliest days. These baptized Christians descended from Jewish families who had accepted conversion under threat of death during the violent pogroms that swept through Spanish cities in 1391 and subsequent decades. Their grandparents had abandoned ancestral faith to survive. Their reward was perpetual suspicion that no amount of demonstrated Catholic devotion could ever dispel. Many converso families had achieved remarkable success during the generations following forced conversion. They practiced medicine in royal courts. They managed international trade networks spanning the Mediterranean. They administered tax collection systems that funded the crown itself. They entered monasteries and rose through church hierarchies. Some had married into noble families whose bloodlines stretched back centuries. This success made them targets rather than respected members of society. The year 1492 delivered catastrophic escalation when Ferdinand and Isabella signed the Alhambra decree commanding all unbaptized Jews to accept Christianity or abandon Spanish territory within 4 months. Tens of thousands chose exile over conversion, scattering across the Mediterranean to establish communities in Ottoman lands, Italian city-states, and North African ports. Those who accepted baptism to remain in their homeland merely joined the ranks of conversos, already living under inquisitorial surveillance. Muslims faced parallel destruction following the completion of Christian territorial conquest. Initial promises of religious toleration proved worthless within a decade as royal decrees demanded conversion or expulsion throughout Castilian territories. These forced converts, called Moriscos, retained distinctive cultural practices, including language, dress, cuisine, and music that marked them as perpetually foreign despite baptismal certificates bearing their names. Suspicion toward Morisco communities intensified across the 16th century until authorities determined that assimilation had completely failed. Between 1609 and 1614, royal commands drove approximately 300,000 people from homes their families had occupied for generations. They were permitted to carry only what they could physically transport, while leaving behind accumulated wealth, property, and the only land they had ever known. The economic devastation proved catastrophic for regions that had depended upon Morisco agricultural labor and craft production. Spain had expelled populations essential to its own prosperity because religious uniformity mattered more than economic survival. Protestant sympathizers, practitioners of mystical spirituality, those accused of blasphemy or bigamy, clergy who exploited confessional relationships, individuals suspected of witchcraft or superstition, all found themselves subject to inquisitorial jurisdiction as the institution expanded its definition of prosecutable offenses across the centuries. No one living in Spain was truly safe. Living under the shadow, the Spanish Inquisition executed thousands and tortured tens of thousands more across its centuries of operation. But the true measure of its horror extended far beyond those who faced tribunals directly. The Inquisition fundamentally transformed how an entire nation related to itself, replacing trust with suspicion and community with isolation that persisted long after the last flames died. Consider the daily existence of a converso family living in any Spanish city during the 16th century. 3 generations had passed since their ancestors accepted baptism. They attended Mass every Sunday without fail. Their children received Catholic education and learned Catholic prayers. They contributed generously to church construction projects and displayed religious artwork prominently throughout their home. None of this provided genuine safety. Every interaction carried potential danger that required constant vigilance and calculated performance. A meal shared with neighbors demanded careful attention to what foods were served and how they were prepared. A casual conversation about Scripture might be remembered and reported if interpreted unfavorably. A business disagreement with a competitor could transform into an accusation of heresy, submitted anonymously to inquisitorial authorities. Families learned to watch their own members with fearful eyes. Parents cautioned children never to speak about household routines outside the home. Servants were monitored constantly because disgruntled employees frequently provided denunciations against employers who had disciplined or dismissed them. Even marriages became strategic calculations, weighing affection against the danger of joining families whose ancestry might attract inquisitorial attention. The wealthy faced particular vulnerability despite their resources and social standing. Substantial assets made families attractive targets for an institution that funded itself through confiscation of property belonging to the condemned. Success itself became dangerous because prosperity among converso families generated resentment that could easily transform into accusations. This climate of perpetual fear produced measurable consequences that researchers have documented extending into the present day. Modern economic studies examining Spanish regions with varying intensities of inquisitorial activity have discovered striking correlations between historical persecution and contemporary outcomes. Areas where the Inquisition operated most aggressively show lower economic development, reduced educational achievement, and diminished levels of social trust compared to regions that experienced less intensive persecution. The Inquisition destroyed something essential within Spanish society that required centuries to rebuild and perhaps never fully recovered. Trust among neighbors disappeared entirely from communities built on denunciation. Confidence in institutions eroded when those institutions served persecution rather than protection. Willingness to take risks and innovate vanished when visibility invited destruction. 356 years of institutionalized terror left wounds that still have not completely healed. The long decline and final victim, the Spanish Inquisition, did not end with dramatic confrontation or sudden abolition. It slowly strangled itself across decades of declining relevance while the world transformed around it, and left its medieval assumptions increasingly absurd. The institution that had burned 2,000 people during its first 50 years executed only a handful during the entire 18th century. Tribunals that once processed thousands of cases annually found themselves with little meaningful work as the populations they had targeted either fled, converted genuinely, or simply disappeared through generations of assimilation and intermarriage. Enlightenment ideas spreading across Europe presented challenges that torture chambers could not address. Spanish intellectuals began questioning whether religious uniformity justified the destruction of human lives and economic productivity. Writers, including Voltaire, made the Inquisition a symbol of everything wrong with superstition and institutional cruelty, damaging Spanish prestige throughout the continent. Napoleon's invasion in 1808 brought temporary abolition when French authorities dismantled the institution as part of broader modernization efforts. Ferdinand VII restored it upon returning to power in 1814, but the restoration lacked conviction or genuine support. The machinery continued functioning in diminished form, prosecuting scattered cases without the systematic terror of earlier centuries. The final victim emerged from circumstances that illustrated how far Spanish society had evolved, while the Inquisition remained frozen in medieval thinking. Cayetano Ripoll was a schoolteacher from Valencia who became the last person executed for heresy in Spanish history. French soldiers had captured him during the Peninsular War and held him prisoner for several years. During captivity, he encountered ideas about religion and morality that emphasized reason and ethical behavior over ritual observance and church authority. After returning to Spain following the war, Ripoll began teaching students that the Ten Commandments provided sufficient moral guidance without requiring adherence to Catholic doctrine and ceremony. Local religious authorities accused him of spreading dangerous ideas that contradicted church teaching. His trial lasted 2 years while he refused to abandon convictions formed through study and reflection. The tribunal condemned him for heresy and delivered him to civil authorities for execution. On July 26, 1826, Cayetano Ripoll died by garrote in Valencia rather than burning at the stake. Even executioners recognized that such public barbarity had become unacceptable to contemporary sensibilities. Authorities placed his body in a barrel painted with flames and buried him in unconsecrated ground, a symbolic acknowledgement that the old ways had finally become impossible to sustain. 8 years later, on July 15, 1834, Queen Regent Maria Cristina formally abolished the Spanish Inquisition forever. The haunting legacy, the flames that consumed the last victim in 1826, eventually died. But the shadow cast by the Spanish Inquisition stretches into the present moment. Spain lost far more than the thousands who perished in its fires. The expulsions scattered Jewish and Muslim populations across the Mediterranean, carrying skills, capital, and commercial networks that had sustained Spanish prosperity for generations. Sephardic communities established themselves in Amsterdam and Constantinople, enriching economies that would eventually surpass Spain itself. Intellectual paralysis accompanied economic decline as the Inquisition controlled ideas with lethal authority. Scientific inquiry that contradicted church teaching invited dangerous attention from men empowered to destroy careers and lives. While Europe experienced explosive growth in knowledge, Spanish thinkers learned that curiosity carried mortal risk. Spain has undertaken formal acknowledgement in recent decades. The government revoked the Alhambra Decree in 1968, nearly 5 centuries after the original expulsion. Legislation in 2015 offered citizenship to descendants of expelled Sephardic Jews, partial remedy for wounds inflicted across 20 generations. These measures cannot restore what was destroyed. Entire family lines ended in flames. Communities that had existed since Roman times vanished permanently. Every inquisitor who authorized torture believed himself a defender of sacred truth. Every spectator who cheered at an auto F considered the burning figure an enemy of everything holy. They were wrong, and their certainty made them monsters. This was the terrifying truth. An institution designed to protect faith destroyed countless faithful lives. It did not merely go too far, it went everywhere fear could reach.